Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. U.S. and Iran exchange fire in the Strait of Hormuz, with the U.S. military saying it intercepted Iranian attacks and responded with self-defense strikes. President Donald Trump claimed great damage was done to the Iranian ships, while Tehran accused Washington of breaching their ceasefire. The damaged South Korean-operated cargo vessel that caught fire near the Strait of Hormuz has arrived at Dubai port. South Korean investigators are now preparing a full-scale probe into the cause of an explosion on the ship. A U.S. trade court has ruled that U.S. President Donald Trump's global 10% tariffs are invalid. It said the cross-the-border duties were not justified under a 1970s trade law. Tensions are escalating in the Middle East after the U.S. has confirmed that its military carried out strikes against Iranian targets in what it described as a response to unprovoked attacks in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran accused the United States of breaching a ceasefire by aggressively targeting an Iranian oil tanker. Our Kim Bo-kyung starts us off.
The U.S. military carried out airstrikes on Iran's Qeshm port and Bandar Abbas on Thursday local time, according to Fox News citing a senior official. Iran's semi-official Mehr news agency had reported earlier that explosions were heard around Qeshm Island near the Strait of Hormuz and in Bandar Abbas in southern Iran. Iran, meanwhile, accused the U.S. of violating the ceasefire by targeting two ships. According to Iran's IRIB broadcaster, a spokesperson for Iran's Khatam al-Anbiya Central Headquarters said Washington targeted two ships in the Strait of Hormuz and that enemy forces were hit by Iranian missile attacks and retreated.
Following these reports, an informed military official said that after the aggressive U.S. military targeted an Iranian oil tanker, hostile enemy units in the area of the Strait of Hormuz came under Iranian missile fire and, after sustaining damage, were forced to flee.
The fact that the two sides exchanged fire was confirmed, with U.S. Central Command saying that American forces intercepted unprovoked Iranian attacks and responded with self-defense strikes as U.S. Navy-guided missile destroyers transited the Strait of Hormuz toward the Gulf of Oman. In the statement, it said the U.S. eliminated inbound threats and targeted Iranian military facilities responsible for attacking U.S. forces, including missile and drone launch sites. It added that the Central Command does not seek escalation, but remains positioned and ready to protect American forces. U.S. President Donald Trump also confirmed the strikes on social media, saying that American destroyers were not damaged, but great damage was done to Iranian attackers. He told ABC News that the latest strike was just a light warning and that the ceasefire remains in effect. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
A Korean-operated cargo vessel damaged by an onboard explosion and fire near the Strait of Hormuz has arrived in Dubai, where South Korean investigators are preparing to launch a full-scale probe into the cause of the incident. Iranian officials are denying any involvement as authorities work to determine whether the blast was caused by an external attack or an internal defect aboard the ship. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
A cargo vessel operated by South Korean shipping company HMM, damaged by an onboard explosion and fire near the Strait of Hormuz, has arrived in Dubai, where South Korean authorities are preparing to launch a full-scale investigation into the incident. According to HMM and local officials, the HMM Namu was towed from waters near Al Quwain in the United Arab Emirates and reached the Dubai port area shortly after midnight Thursday, about 12 hours after towing operations began. The vessel will now head to Dry Docks World Dubai, the Middle East's largest ship repair facility, where investigators will inspect the ship and begin repair work. A South Korean government team made up of investigators from the Korea Maritime Safety Tribunal and forensic fire experts from the National Fire Agency is expected to intensify its probe. Investigators are focusing on whether the explosion and fire were caused by an outside attack, including the possibility of Iranian involvement, or by an internal issue, such as a mechanical defect aboard the vessel. So far, authorities say there are no signs of hull damage consistent with a military strike, and the ship was reportedly neither listing nor taking on water at the time of the incident. Meanwhile, a senior Iranian lawmaker denied Tehran's involvement during video talks on Thursday with South Korean lawmaker Kim Seok-ki. According to Kim, Iranian Parliament Committee Chairman Ibrahim Azizi said that if Iran had attacked a Korean vessel, the government or military would have officially announced it. South Korea's foreign ministry also declined to comment directly on Iranian media reports, saying establishing the facts and determining the exact cause of the incident remained the government's top priority. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
A U.S. trade court has ruled against U.S. President Donald Trump's latest 10% global tariffs, saying the across-the-board duties were not justified under a 1970s trade law. The U.S. Court of International Trade sided with a group of small businesses that challenged the tariffs, which took effect in February, with the ruling only applying to the plaintiffs in the case. In a 2-to-1 decision, the court said the Trade Act of 1974 was not intended to address the types of trade deficits cited by Trump. The businesses argued the tariffs were an attempt to bypass a Supreme Court ruling that struck down Trump's 2025 tariffs imposed under emergency economic powers. Responding to the ruling, the Blue House said on Friday that Korea will continue to closely monitor related developments while seeking to maintain a balance of interests under its current tariff deal with the United States. North Korea this week removed all references to uniting the Korean peninsula from its constitution. The constitution had previously said the regime sought the reunification of the homeland, but that clause has now been deleted. For more on what this could mean, we're joined today by Professor Min Jung-un, professor at the Korea National Diplomatic Academy. Professor Min, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Right. So what does this latest constitutional revision signify?
Well, as you mentioned, it is known that North Korea's revised constitution has a new territorial clause and dropped all references to unification with South Korea. So it suggests that North Korea emphasizes its intention on the two hostile states policy. So the revised constitution showed that North Korea has defined its territory as the land bordering China and Russia to the north and South Korea to the south, along with its adjacent territorial waters and airspace. And in addition, all references to reunification, including terms such as peaceful reunification and the great national unity, were eliminated from the Constitution. So personally, I think that such changes in the Constitution signal Pyongyang's willingness or intention to project an image of a normal state. And meanwhile, the Constitution did not identify South Korea as a primary foe, although North Korean leader Kim Jong-un previously characterized South Korea as an enemy. So it suggests that the Constitution laid the groundwork for peaceful coexistence between the two Koreas. So it is expected that there would be little change in stably maintaining security situation on the Korean peninsula.
I see, but despite that revision, South Korea's Blue House says it will still pursue a policy of peaceful coexistence on the Korean peninsula. And Seoul's intelligence agency also says that although the North has defined the two Koreas as separate states, hostility toward the South has been significantly reduced. What's your take on this? How should Seoul reflect the latest revision in its policy toward North Korea?
Yes, it is likely that South Korea will continue to pursue its peaceful coexistence policy on the peninsula, although North Korea's revised constitution distanced itself from South Korea. As you mentioned, South Korean government said that it would conduct a comprehensive review about North Korea's constitutional revision. And North Korea's revised constitution reflected the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's policy shift that North Korea would regard South Korea as a separate country rather than a partner for eventual unification. And it also removed the pledge to achieve Korean reunification, and it newly defined the North Korean territory without reference to South Korea. Meanwhile, the revised constitution mentioned that North Korea would never tolerate any infringement on its territory bordering South Korea, but it stopped, again, describing South Korea as an enemy. So there are no hostile remarks toward South Korea in the constitution. So we can see that North Korea made the two states stance clear, and it has lowered its hostility toward South Korea. So it is expected that South Korea would pursue the peaceful coexistence policy on the Korean Peninsula and would make a consistent effort to reduce tensions on the peninsula and improve the relations between two Koreas.
Right, and North Korea also defended its possession of nuclear weapons at a recent meeting at the United Nations, and it said it's not bound to any treaty on non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. So how should South Korea and the international community interpret this message?
Yes, North Korea argued that it is not bound under any circumstances by NPT and insisted that any attempt to force Pyongyang to fulfill treaty obligation is a violation of international law. And as you may remember, North Korea formally withdrew from NPT in 2003. And the North Korean state media said that the North Korean ambassador to the United Nations, that he argued that North Korea's nuclear program reflects its obligation under the law on nuclear first policy and the constitution, which defined the country's legal status as a nuclear armed state. And so he claimed that North Korea rejects acts of any specific countries, including U.S., that take issues with its access, North Korea's access to nuclear weapons and exercise of its defensive rights as a sovereign nation. And the North Korea's recently revised constitution stipulated its status and again, the nuclear armed state, and it also codified Chairman Kim Jong-un's authority to command the use of nuclear weapons for the first time. But so I think that North Korea has confirmed its status as a nuclear armed state even through its revised constitution. It's like the institutionalization of its nuclear state. But I also think that it should be noted that such an argument came out amid expectations that North Korea could be on the agenda at the upcoming summit between U.S. and China in Beijing next week. So I think North Korea want to reaffirm its argument that North Korea is a nuclear armed state, and it could not be negotiable when it resumes the summit diplomacy with the United States. So it seems that North Korea want to enhance its bargaining power before the upcoming summit between U.S. and China, although it's not clear if President Trump would meet Chairman Kim Jong-un when he comes to Beijing next week.
I see. And the North Korean women's soccer team is scheduled to make a rare visit to South Korea for a match. How symbolic is this, and could this possibly help improve inter-Korean relations?
Anyway, it's a very great news to hear. Yeah, and as you mentioned, it is known that North Korean women's football club, not the national team, club will play in Suwon near Seoul later this month. The Korea Football Association said that Daegoyang Women's FC will travel down to Suwon to play with the Suwon FC women in the finals of the Asian Football Confederation Women's Champions League on May 20th. And this will be the first appearance that a North Korean women's football club play in South Korea. Of course, in 2005 and 2013, the North Korean women's national team came down to South Korea and played at the East Asian Football Federation Women's Championship. And as you may remember, the North Korean women's national team also played at the 2014 Incheon Asian Game, and they won the gold medal. So the North Korea's decision to send its women's football club to South Korea this time is drawing attention because there is a growing expectation that the event could serve as a momentum to ease tensions between the two Koreas. And it will be the first trip by North Koreans to South Korea after Chairman Kim emphasized the two hostile state policy. The Chairman Kim mentioned that inter-Korean relations were like two states hostile to each other in late 2023, and he also called South Korea the most hostile state recently and reaffirmed his intention to bolster the two hostile state stance. So, and the South Korean government is cautious about making too much expectation about the North Korea's visit this time and insists that sports should be kept separate from politics. But some experts, including myself, see the event as an opportunity to potentially resume a dialogue between the two Koreas because sports have historically played in bridging the two Koreas together. So we will see what will actually happen later this month.
Right, I guess we'll have to see how that match plays out. All right, Professor Min, thank you so much for your time and insight today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
On the legal front, with regard to South Korea's short-lived martial law under the former Yoon administration, the prison sentence for former Prime Minister Han Duck-soo has been shortened to 15 years by the Seoul High Court. Our Ian-jin reports.
An appeals court in South Korea on Thursday reduced the prison sentence for former Prime Minister Han Duck-soo to 15 years from 23 given by a lower court in January in relation to former President Yoon Suk-yeol's declaration of martial law on the night of December 3, 2024. The reduction by 8 years was due to the court ruling that records didn't show clear evidence of Han's active participation in the insurrection, as well as taking into consideration Han's over 50 years of public service. However, the appeals court upheld the lower court's finding that Han was guilty of engaging in key acts to help Yoon declare martial law and failed to dissuade him. During the ruling, the judge also specified that Han was aware of plans to cut off power and water supplies to some media companies during the martial law, yet again failed to prevent it. Judge Lee Seung-cheol of the Seoul High Court also highlighted that Han abandoned the grave responsibilities that come from authority and position that had been entrusted to him, including intervening in the president's wrongful exercise of authority. The judge added that afterwards, Han continued to commit crimes to cover up his guilt. Meanwhile, Han stands by his denial of wrongdoing on all charges except perjury. His lawyer said he would appeal again. Ian-jin, Arirang News.
Content creators from around the world are taking on a new role as digital ambassadors for Korea. The Culture Ministry has put together the 7th K-Influencer Cohort, bringing together creators from nearly 100 countries to share Korean culture with global audiences. Our correspondent Cho Young-eun reports.
Global content creators selected by the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism as K-influencers have officially begun their activities to serve as ambassadors introducing Korea through social media. The launch ceremony for the 7th K-Influencer Academy was held Thursday in Seoul, with around 100 foreign creators residing in Korea attending in person, alongside Deputy Minister Kong Hyung-sik. The 7th K-Influencer Cohort includes creators with already established global audiences, producing multilingual content featuring everyday life in Korea.
When people visit Korea, I want to show them not only Seoul, but also other cities where they can have fun. Many foreign visitors only know the famous tourist spots, but I hope to introduce more diverse regions of Korea.
One of the ceremony's highlight was a talk show introducing the K-Influencer Academy program, where creators with large subscriber bases shared insights and experiences from building global audiences. Participants also emphasized that creating meaningful content goes beyond simply entertaining viewers online, as they hope to introduce broader and more diverse sides of Korea.
It is an honor to represent global influencers and participate in this K-Influencer program. I hope this opportunity helps more foreigners create meaningful content introducing Korea to the world.
Creators added that they hope the program will encourage more foreigners to communicate Korea's culture and values with audiences around the world.
From the beginning, I believed the most important thing was not simply making entertaining content, but creating content that conveys value and offers something people can learn from.
The Cultural Ministry said it evaluated applicants based on their content planning abilities and commitment to promoting Korean culture, ultimately selecting 1,152 from more than 4,000 applications. This year's recruitment drive attracted the highest number of applicants since the program began in 2020, representing the growing interest in Korean culture. A ministry official said K-influencers are more than just content creators, describing them as ambassadors promoting Korean culture to the world, adding that the government plans to continue expanding educational programs and support for participants. 조영은, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. U.S. President Trump on Thursday gave the European Union until July 4th, America's Independence Day, to fulfill its side of the trade deal struck last year. He warned that tariffs on EU goods, including cars, will jump to, quote, much higher levels if the deadline is missed. Trump said he issued the ultimatum during a, quote, great phone call with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, in which both leaders also agreed that Iran must never acquire a nuclear weapon. The trade deal reached in Scotland last July requires the EU to cut tariffs on U.S. industrial goods to zero. But legislation to implement the deal has moved slowly through the European Parliament. Trump had already threatened last Friday to raise EU car tariffs from 15% to 25% over the delays. Von der Leyen said good progress is being made toward early July compliance. Some of America's most powerful CEOs are joining President Trump on his trip to Beijing next week. The heads of Nvidia, Apple, Boeing, Exxon, Blackstone, Citigroup, Qualcomm, and Visa have all been invited. Trump's summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping has already been rescheduled once due to the Iran war, and Chinese officials have expressed unease about holding the meeting before the conflict is resolved. Boeing is watching the trip particularly closely. Its CEO said last month the company is counting on the Trump administration to unlock a long-awaited Chinese order. The summit is to take place on May 14th and 15th. Health authorities across 4 continents are racing to track down passengers who left the Hantavirus-stricken cruise ship before the outbreak was detected. More than 24 people from at least 12 countries disembarked on April 24th without any contact tracing, nearly 2 weeks after the first passenger had already died on board. A Dutch flight attendant who briefly came into contact with an infected passenger is showing symptoms and is being tested in isolation in Amsterdam, potentially becoming the first known person outside the ship to be infected. The cruise ship is now sailing towards Spain's Canary Islands with more than 140 passengers and crew still aboard. The WHO says the risk to the wider public remains low. A rare 6-carat blue diamond rated both fancy vivid blue and internally flawless is heading to auction at the Sotheby's in Geneva next week with an estimated price of up to $12 million. The auction house said on Thursday that the stone, sourced from South Africa's Cullinan mine, combines intense color, 0 internal flaws, and no fluorescence. Sotheby's calls this combination exceptionally scarce, even among blue diamonds.
The rain moved out overnight and much of the country is enjoying bright, clear skies with clean air. Today's parents stay in Korea, and despite the sunshine, temperatures will stay below seasonal norms. But the weekend looks like it's going to be warmer. By Sunday, Seoul could reach 25 degrees Celsius, feeling more like early summer. Meanwhile, except for Gangwon-do province where clouds and showers may linger through the afternoon, UV levels will be very high. If you're heading outside, hats or sun protection should come in handy. And this afternoon, most regions will see highs ranging between 20 and 22 degrees Celsius with good air quality. And as we are getting into mid-May, we should start noticing warmer mornings, and highs will also jump to the high 20s by the end of next week.
Now that's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.